Hey everyone! Today we're going to be looking at a full drive through Napa, California, and hopefully give you the answer to the question of how usable the full self-driving beta is in day-to-day life and when you aren't purposely trying to push it over the limits like I do in most of my other videos. Although the car doesn't behave perfectly in this drive and we do have some disengagements, I'd say this was a pretty accurate example of how it performs and where it has trouble, so I'll leave it up to you to decide how usable it currently is. You can see the beta approaches this first intersection pretty cautiously. We don't have a stop sign where these first group of roads meet, and you can see it kind of creeping forward and making sure there's no opposing traffic from the sides, and then we proceed forward to the real unprotected left here. Overall, very well done. I like that we left that first crossroad clear until the truck ahead of us moved forward, and then we proceeded to the stop sign instead of just going right up to the back of the truck, which would have blocked that other road. I'm also using a new aspect ratio for this video, which is a bit wider than usual. It should look better on a smartphone, but I don't know, it has benefits and drawbacks, so please let me know what you think in the comments. After we get our green light, the beta has to deal with some cyclists ahead, and surprisingly it actually accelerates to get in front of the car that was on our left so it can kind of move over into their lane to give the cyclists extra room. Really nicely done though. Cautious, but not overly cautious. I went ahead and moved the map on the bottom right of the screen a little bit so it'd be easier to tell where the navigation route we're taking is going. I know it's still a little tough to see, and I'm still experimenting with the best way to actually show this. Also starting to rain here, just a little bit, not too bad, but it does pick up a little bit later in the drive. Coming up, we have a bit of a double roundabout. We are turning right at each of them, which does make things a little bit easier. The first one's handled pretty well. Its turn signals even make sense, which is a pleasant surprise over the last time we went through a roundabout in the previous video. Approaching the second one, a little bit slow and hesitant through here, kind of wants to give the right-of-way to everybody else, but it did remain smooth through the whole thing. So although it was a little bit hesitant for my liking, overall pretty decent job. I would rather have the beta be slow and smooth like that, rather than fast and jerky when it's not confident about something. Staying predictable to other people around is probably the most important thing. And speaking of staying predictable, we have a non-operational stoplight ahead that's blinking red, which means you're supposed to treat it like a stop sign. As I approached this intersection, I heard people honking at each other, so humans definitely have some trouble in situations like this too. There seems like there's a lot of pretty good opportunities to go here, but the beta plays it extra safe. You can also see it hesitates a little bit through the intersection. Kind of hovers around 10 miles an hour for a second. It wasn't really jerky or anything, but I mention it because I could definitely feel it inside of the car. And the usability has a lot to do with how it feels, which is sometimes really hard to get across the screen. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll take slow and comfortable all day over the alternative, which is why I feel like it's doing a pretty good job so far, but I know a lot of people have differing opinions about that and how assertive it should be. It does an excellent job of smoothly getting us into our turning lane, even uses the suicide lane, and then starts yielding for the car in front of us, but then quickly realizes that he's turning and takes the right away. It did hit the brakes a little bit too hard there whenever it was deciding to yield for that car or not, but other than that, really, really smooth. And as the rain starts to get a little worse, we do have a notification on the screen telling us that full self-driving may be degraded because poor weather is detected. Not a lot of good visibility at this stop sign here because of those cars parked on either side, but it does creep out a really good amount to see cross traffic coming. It only goes when it knows it's completely safe. Honestly though, so far, this is kind of exactly how I expect a self-driving car to drive. Overly cautious, but at the same time smooth. And it's doing a good job so far. The biggest praise I can give it is that I gave my dad a 20-minute car ride, and he's usually pretty sensitive to jerky movements and doesn't really like when I use the beta, but this time he didn't even realize I was using it the entire time. In my world, that is a pretty huge milestone. The only thing left to do is make drives like those a little bit more consistent. We have a pretty tough unprotected left here where cars are blocking our view from either side, and you can see autopilot creeps forward, but doesn't have a good view of that car coming from the left. Honestly, inside the car, I didn't even have a good view of this either. The third-person camera view had a little bit better view of that situation because of how high it's mounted. Now, I'm not going to say that autopilot did great there. It could definitely benefit from cameras mounted a little bit more towards the front of the car, but it did correct its mistake in a way that the other human on the road could understand. I don't really think having the car never make mistakes is really an option, but if it can behave more human-like during those mistakes, I think it's a win. And I think that's kind of what we saw there. We are approaching another unprotected left, and this time with much more traffic. You can even see the traffic backing up to the left there where he gave the right-of-way to the guy in front of us. So yeah, a lot of cars here, a lot of people to give the right-of-way to. There's a turning lane in front of us as well, so this is going to be a tough one. You can see it start to slowly creep forward, even though there's cars approaching from the left. And I'm actually a huge fan of this new creeping behavior. I think it kind of shows intention to other drivers where it kind of lacked that before. You'll see as soon as these cars turn in front of us, even though it's highlighting them, it's obviously predicting them, it creeps forward at the same time, which I think is great. It really shows good intention. It also continues before the path of the other vehicles completely clears. Like right now, it's already starting to move forward before that truck makes the left turn. Just really, really well done here. 10 out of 10 unprotected left. I really get the feeling that autopilot is starting to plan a little bit further ahead than before. It's not only predicting the paths of these other vehicles, but it feels like it's using that to drive more naturally on the road, which is super exciting. The one area I wish it did accelerate a little quicker in is these all-way stops like this one. You can see as soon as the person in front of us goes, it takes us quite a while to start accelerating, where I would have probably taken off a little bit quicker than this as soon as he started moving through the intersection. If you like this style of video, please let me know by either liking the video or leaving a comment. I know most of what I've been releasing lately has been pretty fast-paced with a lot of cuts and stuff, but I still do think there's a place for full uncut drives like this to give you a little better idea of what it's actually like to use this software. After this right turn, there are some pedestrians in the road. The beta does a pretty good job of giving them some extra room. I probably would have given a little bit more. Unfortunately ahead, I already knew this mail truck was going to pull out right in front of us, so rather than make things awkward and have autopilot slam on the brakes, I went ahead and just took over early on that one. Also some clunks on the brake pedal when it sees this incoming car, but does get us around just fine. That one was kind of a tough one. It wasn't even really delayed in reacting at all. I already knew, like before, just by it being a mail truck and it being like, you know, the way that it was, the way that it be, I knew he was going to pull out in front of us. You got that? It's about that time during editing where the drinks are starting to come out, so prepare yourself. Another fairly low visibility intersection here. Apologize for that noise you just heard. I was looking back and forth and trying to lean my head forward to see around these cars and hit the camera. And more low visibility stop signs ahead where traffic coming in from the sides does not stop. I feel like these intersections are probably some of the more dangerous that are kind of just everyday intersections where there's cars parked off to the side and you can't really see around them. Turning right at these intersections is one thing, but going straight across like that or the unprotected lefts, they're a bit sketchy. And I'm not just talking about the FSD beta, I'm talking about like when I'm driving myself too. Like sometimes you just can't see around some van that's just parked in the wrong spot, and you kind of just have to hope that somebody's not blazing down the street. Overall, it does pretty well with those, what I would call like dangerous intersections, but sometimes it gets it all wrong. Like this intersection up here, you can tell, like I can even feel it behind the wheel and the clunk of the brakes. It just doesn't really understand this. You can see it starts creeping way too far forward, and when I re-engage here in a second, and I try a few times, that creeping line, it just lacks confidence. It's bouncing back and forth, and the beta really just doesn't understand what it's supposed to be doing in this intersection. So went ahead and pressed the snapshot button, which sends this clip back into Tesla for training, and did end up completely manually driving through this intersection and then re-engaging after. I actually thought Napa would be a pretty easy place to drive, without a lot of difficult intersections, but boy was I wrong. There sure seems to be a bunch of them around here, with basically stop signs with cars parked on either side, making visibility really poor, and some of these cars going through here are going pretty quick. Sorry about the noise again. That was me turning my head side to side, making sure things were clear. We did have that car coming in from the left, but it did give it enough oomph to get through that intersection just fine. So here's a question for you. Say Tesla could release a software update tomorrow that makes it avoid intersections like this, or maybe only make right turns at them, similar to like a UPS or FedEx driver. Do you think it's worth it? While yes, it would make the disengagements go way down and would probably make it overall more safe to use, they'd be gathering a lot less data at intersections like this. And I'm curious if you guys think the trade-off is worth it. Up here we have kind of a funky turn. You see that 15-mile-an-hour sign that we just went by. Autopilot does slow down, but then has a pretty harsh brake right here where it comes right down in speed, and even worse right here, all the way down to 4 miles an hour for a second there. Nobody behind me, so this was fine, but that definitely could have been handled better. Just putting in a new navigation route here. In all honesty, this might not be the best test, because we're going through a lot of corners here, and most of my drives day to day are on long stretches of road, but I know that's not the most entertaining thing. Up here we have a couple pretty cool things. The first is how far away it visualizes this bicycle as it goes by. Super cool. But it also doesn't slow down at all for that car that just passed by in front of us, which is pretty awesome. It knew it was going to clear us in plenty of time. The next one was pretty surprising. Autopilot creeps forward and seems like it commits very early, even though there's traffic in that other lane. It does hesitate a bit there, and I did override the accelerator pedal. Honestly, I didn't expect it at all. I've never seen Autopilot pull out into an empty lane when there's cars in the lane beside them. That was definitely a first for me. You can see it highlighting the truck behind us and the SUV ahead. It's trying to tuck into this spot because we have a left turn ahead, but the truck does not let us in. I don't know if he just didn't see our turn signal or what. Then he does back off and give us some room, but we've already kind of gone too far. So you can see Autopilot starts highlighting other vehicles, trying to find its way into this gap. This time he does give us plenty of room, and we are able to squeeze in here and make it all the way into our turning lane. Little bit awkward, but it did it. I always find these human and robot interactions pretty interesting. That one didn't feel very human-like. Think probably could use some improvements there. That guy did leave us a pretty big gap for a pretty long period of time, and Autopilot still was a bit hesitant to take it. But pretty interesting problem, you know, on what to do in these particular scenarios. At this next intersection, we have to make a sweeping right turn. So there is no straight through this intersection. All of it's sweeping turns. You can see on the visualization, it doesn't really know what to make of these arrows on the ground. It is using its turn signal right now, which I don't think is the right thing because we were kind of going straight-ish, but I'm not sure. But I can also appreciate how tough of a problem that is. You know, the car's at an intersection, we're making a sweeping right turn. Our turn signal should be on right? Well, not in that case. Here, Autopilot's a little bit late to get into this right turning lane. You see he was a little bit hesitant, and the path planner just has a little bit of issue here. Didn't really feel natural, and there was some jerkiness in the steering wheel. So that one was pretty, I would say easy. Like the lane markings were pretty straightforward, so I'm not really sure what caused that one. I think consistency is probably the main thing that the beta needs to work on. It'll do some amazing things. It'll feel super natural and human-like through a lot of corners, and then sometimes conditions will be, in my opinion, perfect, and it'll do something very odd, which is kind of unsettling. It's not all the time, you know, like for the most part it does a really good job, like as you're seeing in this video, but sometimes it's some things you'd think it would be able to handle very easy, it doesn't, and vice versa. Sometimes it handles some really hard problems really easily. Here's another intersection where the beta was a little bit cautious. You can see there's some pedestrians around and there's some on the right side, and the beta doesn't creep or anything until the pedestrian starts walking across the street onto their driveway. We also have to make this kind of sweeping turn here, and it had its turn signal on, which I guess was correct. It's another one of those tough ones. You'd think out of all the driving problems, turn signals would be one of the easiest, but the longer I use the beta on the more roads I put it on, like, I understand its intentions, and it's like, man, it's a rough problem. As we approach this next intersection, I want you to focus on the car coming in from the right-hand side of the frame. That car seems to be carrying quite a bit of speed, and the beta actually notices this and kind of stops halfway through the intersection, just to make sure he's going to come to a complete stop. I like that. I don't think there was anything wrong with that. It fixed itself really quickly and went through the intersection, and much better to be safe than sorry. We have a false slowdown here. You can see on the visualization it was highlighting the area in front of us almost like a new lane. I think it might have been the gravel or dirt on the road that confused it a little bit, but we did have a pretty noticeable slowdown event there. I've been thinking I'd like to do some testing on what Autopilot's able to recognize. Like, there's a lot of areas around me, a lot of construction going on, a lot of dirt on the road, a lot of random objects. I think I'd like to go out there and kind of see what's what, and see what it's seeing on the visualization and what it's not. So stay tuned for that one. Hopefully I can get out there and make one like that pretty soon. Here we have another unprotected intersection. We're going straight through with poor visibility. These parked cars on the road are so rough. I've never been in a place that has so many intersections like this. You can see a little hesitant, but does get us through here very nicely. We're also going to have a truck approaching from the front. I wish we'd yield a little bit more, but it decides to thread the needle. I know I mentioned that on a previous video too. All you guys called me crazy and that this move was fine. So I guess this is fine. It's just not exactly what I would do. As you can probably tell, this video is a bit different than the others I've been making lately. Instead of trying to cut all the time and summarize things, I really think there still is a place for these full drives. I guess we'll see how this video does. I doubt too many people are going to be getting to this point. I feel a little crazy for editing this long, but yeah. One thing that you can see here is we're in the right lane and we have to make a left turn ahead. You can see it on the map, and the beta is staying in the right lane until we're like a couple hundred feet away from the intersection. This happens pretty frequently and kind of drives me crazy. Like, you can see the navigation say, oh, here's a turn in 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, and it doesn't do anything about it until the very last moment. I mean, it's not consistent, which we've discussed. The lane to our right of ours is closed off, and these vehicles have to merge in front of us, and I think the beta does a really good job of actually staying really smooth. Despite this car going in front of us and hitting the brakes pretty hard, it stays smooth through this entire maneuver. You can also see on the visualization, it's visualizing those signs. Obviously it's doing the cones, but even the signs and the little things behind it, it's kind of like some pseudo LiDAR thing. You can see it even better up here. Really interesting stuff. I'm definitely going to have to do some more experimentation and see exactly what it's picking up. Maybe like throw some stuff out onto the road and see what happens. That visualization for unknown objects actually isn't something that I saw right away. It took me quite a while to actually see that. It's very, very subtle. We reached the end of our navigation route, so I'm just putting another one in. You can see more of that pseudo LiDAR on the bottom right-hand side of the visualization there. Really trippy looking. So in this intersection, there are a couple of confused pedestrians. They don't know exactly where they want to go. So you see the lady to the left starts walking into the road, then changes her mind and they walk back. Autopilot then changes its focus to the car. Then they do start walking across the street and it starts yielding to them. So Autopilot actually does take the right-of-way in front of that car on the cross street there, which I think in this scenario was actually the right move. We were already stuck in the intersection waiting for those pedestrians, and I'm actually glad and kind of surprised that it took that right-of-way. It's kind of more of a complex scenario than it first seems. And yes, I do realize that I am navigating through some of the exact same streets as I was before, so I go ahead and change up the navigation path here. to get us going into a new direction onto some new streets. I'm terrible at picking random spots. They always end up being the same spots as I chose before. You see, at that light, we get immediately into the right-hand lane from that left turn. I'm surprised how many of you say that that's incorrect. I looked up the laws, and at least in California, that's like a perfectly legal thing to do. Like, if there's one left turn lane and 2 lanes, you can enter either one. And same with right turns. You can enter either lane. But there's apparently a lot of places where that's not what you're supposed to do, which I found kind of surprising, because I praised the beta and the last couple updates for doing that. I think it feels so much more natural, and it's how I drive, but didn't realize there were so many differences where others drive. Here's another example of the smoothness. You'll see the beta kind of comes out here and has to yield for another car coming. In scenarios like this, it used to just kind of slam on the brakes until the car passed by. But you'll see that time it maintained forward momentum and felt really natural. Felt like a good limousine driver, you know, which is exactly how the beta should feel. I don't think overall smoothness and limousine driving is the ultimate focus right now. I think they're just trying to get it to work in all the scenarios that it possibly can. And then comfort probably comes later. But software update through software update, I think they're doing a pretty amazing job of making this really smooth. It's not freaking out nearly as much as it used to before. It can be close to cars, kind of like what you're seeing here, and be smooth about it. And don't forget, we also have AI Day 2 to look forward to, coming up here in just a few more days. I cannot wait. The last one just absolutely blew my mind. Like, getting an insight into how this stuff actually works, just really dang cool. I hope there's more mention of the occupancy network we talked about in some of my last couple videos. I can't wait to see what they're going to be doing with that, and also how the visualization is going to change to show that. I think that's going to be really, really cool looking. So we have a couple pedestrians walking up from the right-hand side. You can see autopilot displays a creeping wall, but does yield to these pedestrians. Then they decide to be nice and walk behind the car, and the car actually reacts to that right away and just proceeds right on through. Also, nice acceleration through here. It was kind of a lot of acceleration, but very, very smooth. It's visualizing all those trucks off to the side of the road. That's pretty cool. That pedestrian scenario was another one of those that I wouldn't have expected it to do so well at. I would have expected some hesitation while the pedestrians were still walking towards us or close by, but yeah, pleasantly surprised. Doesn't do too hot in this one though. It takes this railroad crossing line as the stopping line for this stoplight. So you see, here's where it thinks it comes to a full stop, and it creeps all the way forward into the intersection. And to the people standing there, probably just looks like we creeped all the way through a red light, which is not a good look. I went ahead and pressed the snapshot button because I think that data could be useful. We have another confused pedestrian ahead. This may be the same lady as before. You can see her take a step out there and then stop. And then she starts walking again, just staring at her phone, really has no idea. Autopilot did brake pretty hard, but we were going to wind up right on the crosswalk. So I did end up manually pressing the accelerator pedal to get us through there and not make things awkward, and hitting the snapshot button again. Man, driving is hard. Like, honestly, I'm not sure of what feedback I can give it there. I don't think it technically did anything wrong, except for maybe, like, stopping too late, but, you know, it's almost like they couldn't have done a better job at purposely trying to confuse us. So, like, I understood its intentions and where it was going, and coming to a complete stop is always the safer route, even though, you know, I would have just, you know, that lady's distracted. I would have just gone right through there, but probably a good thing that it stopped. I don't know. Another unprotected left here. You can see autopilot creeping forward and taking its time, making sure it's safe from both directions. When it pulls out, it actually uses the suicide lane for a second before it reorients itself. And we also have a left turn to make at this traffic light ahead. And you can see we're kind of in a tough spot here. I would 100% be driving over this double yellow to get behind the other car so I could make this light. But autopilot does it the legal route, and it kind of waits for traffic to shift ahead. It does cross over the double yellow ever so slightly, but we do end up missing this traffic light. And it ended up being a very long traffic light, so I just cut to when it turned green. Is it bad that I wished that autopilot did the illegal thing there and got around traffic to make that light? I don't know, probably. And if that wasn't bad, it's probably bad that I accidentally navigated into the middle of a cemetery. Probably should have just not allowed the car to go through here. And you can see it accelerating, which is why I disengaged. It was just driving too fast. It's really not designed for areas like this. And I did try to let it drive a little bit through here, but you know, it tries to get to the set speed. It doesn't really understand, so yeah, obviously going to be keeping the car on a much shorter leash and not allowing it to do a lot of the stuff that I normally would. That being said, I do end up re-engaging right here. I actually did it because I thought that car was going to be in front of us and we'd have a follow car to lead us out of the cemetery, but he ends up turning away. But I did allow it to drive, and this time it actually did better. I think it's because we had so many turns in such close range. You can also see it visualizing the creep wall for almost all these intersections that come together. So definitely doing that dynamically, which is pretty cool. We have a quick right turn to make here that you can't really see, that it misses. You can see it just a little kind of a harsh break there too. But we missed that turn, so it does need to reroute. Takes it a second, but it does reroute to go to the right. Do also meet up with that other car who we just had an interaction with a second ago, but yields for him and we end up following them out. It is doing good through close quarters like this. Like, I haven't felt nervous that it's been too close to any of the curbs or the walls or anything, and I know it's had some trouble with that in the past. You can see the car in front of us go around this sign that's in the road up here, and autopilot just doesn't understand the context here. It visualizes it. You can see it kind of flash on the visualization, but it goes to the left instead of the proper way, which would have been to the right, of course. Pulling back out onto the road, you can see autopilot visualizes the creeping line and creeps forward. Areas like this, where there's no stop sign for us, used to be pretty problematic for the beta, but now it seems like it's creeping for visibility everywhere, which is a pretty huge improvement. It definitely seems like after every update, it seems to do more with what it sees, if that makes any sense. Like, instead of just going off the map data, stop signs, intersections, it's really starting to look out and react to those things way quicker than it ever has before. Here's another questionable turn signal. This is another one of these kind of weird intersections where it's technically straight, but not that straight. But, you know, having the left-hand turn signal on could probably confuse people around us and make them think we're actually turning left at that intersection. Yeah, man, those turn signals. Something so easy, like the easiest thing in driving that I can think of, like, after I analyze all these situations, you know, man, it's really not that easy. And speaking of not that easy, we have a dead man's left ahead. So I hate these maneuvers. Traffic is backing up, as you can see, like these cars are coming to a stop, and there's people who think they're being polite, who are like stopping and like waving them through. But, you know, traffic around behind them can't see that. So you'll see the guy in front of us like peels out to take off, and that's kind of what you have to do. It's, you know, autopilot goes a little bit safer, makes sure that they're all completely stopped before it proceeds, and very well done, very safely handled. I know those unprotected stop signs across traffic is tough, but I feel like that situation is probably the roughest in driving, or at least, you know, that you deal with on a regularly frequent basis, where it's just the visibility is very poor. But the good thing is autopilot has done a really good job at pretty much every single one of those situations. And we end the drive with a very hard brake. You see this cyclist was not going to come to a complete stop at that stop sign. He was just going to roll it, and we would have been fine if we just continued straight, but Autopilot didn't want to risk it at all. So that was definitely the hardest maneuver of the entire drive. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have a hard time believing anybody's still watching, but if you are, thank you, truly. Until next time. Bye.